There's an old saying that goes, "Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can never hurt me." Whoever first uttered that phrase, firstly, sounds unbearably smug, and secondly, has probably never had to kill an enemy in Typing of the Dead with a ridiculous word such as otolaryngologist?
What the hell is even that?
For those out of the loop, Typing of the Dead was an arcade spin-off of House of the Dead 2, released in 1999, and yes, actually available to play in arcades with a fully fledged keyboard, both for Player 1 and Player 2, which was then later ported in 2001 to the Sega Dreamcast. It's also available on PC, provided you know where to look, and as it happens, is just a ridiculous amount of fun. Not only do you get to retain the wonderfully awful original voice acting for House of the Dead 2 in this, but you also get to expand your vocabulary, and hopefully typing skills at the same time, as later levels get ever more elaborate with the phrases and sentences that you'll need to type in order to bring down enemies. Not to mention the Stage 2 boss, which is just absolutely bullshit because you can only type when its chest cavity is open, but the goddamn dialogue box is always in the way. But I digress. This is Doom Mod Madness after all, and of course an intrepid modder by the name of M8F has taken it upon themselves to bring such vocabulary-heavy action into Doom itself. And in that regard, welcome to Typist, where guns are replaced with keyboards and words most assuredly kill. Now, as you might imagine, there's a few concessions that need to be made here when translating the gameplay of Typing of the Dead into Doom. For one, Doom is not a rail shooter. In order to successfully complete a level, you'll still need to move about under your own volition, interact with switches and doors and what have you, and when it comes to the combat, the way it works here in Typist is as soon as an enemy is in range, it will lock you down, essentially freezing you in place, while it transitions to the kill phrase mode, as I like to call it, because obviously, if you're moving around, you're going to be using letters on the keyboard. You're going to be using W, A, S, and D, and that's going to interact a little poorly if you've got a word with any of those letters in it. As for the weapons, you might be wondering if this keyboard right here is your lot, but actually, no, you get the full benefit of the Doom weapons roster here. The sprites, however, aren't actually part of the vanilla version of Typist. This is thanks to an add-on designed by the wonderful Zikri Shadow, and includes all sorts of wonderful little touches, such as reload animations. Another aspect of the weaponry here that's fairly interesting is the fact that damage across the board has been significantly beefed. You'll certainly notice that when it comes to the likes of the standard pistol keyboard, which has the tendency to thoroughly jib lower tier enemies from a single shot. And this, in my estimation, is to just facilitate a faster pace of gameplay, especially when you consider the stop-start nature of having to round a corner, get rooted to the spot, and then find yourself typing out a word in order to kill an enemy. That said, sticking to the pistol isn't always going to cut the mustard. When it comes to bigger, chunkier enemies such as mancubuses, you're definitely going to want to have to move up the roster to something like the shotgun, or ideally, the super shotgun, which, as you can plainly see here, can just straight up one-shot them. Naturally, this kind of stuff also begs the question of whether or not Typist utterly trivializes encounters with the likes of, say, a cyber demon, or even a spider mastermind. If only there was a level where both of them existed in close proximity. Oh wait, there is! As you can plainly see, one SSG blast here is not enough, but mercifully, you don't have to keep typing different words in order to reel off a shot. The same one over and over should suffice until the thing finally keels over and dies. As for the amount of shots required, a lot less than standard, as should be expected. About 4 or 5 shots will do the trick, heck of a lot less if you're using a rocket launcher or higher, and this also serves to highlight another element of Typist that facilitates slightly smoother gameplay, given the clunky method of trying to kill things: projectiles. They move distinctly slower than usual, and this is to help you take advantage, if rooted to the spot of course, of the dodge mechanics. You can see them at the top of the HUD. They stick around even outside of combat, and when activated will allow you to shunt your character in any of the 4 cardinal directions: forwards, backwards, left, or right. Handy in a pinch if you're facing down a third group of enemies or flinging fireballs in your general direction, and also handy if you need to maneuver your character into direct line of sight, which is still required if you want to actually land a kill shot. The other solution, however, is you can just straight up disengage typing mode. This is done by hitting the escape key. It'll free you from typing mode and allow you to maneuver yourself into a slightly more advantageous position. Also, while using this, you can straight up use the weapons as normal, just shooting things in the face without having to type out letters, thereby defeating the entire point of the mod in general. I mean, sure, playing this way does make the chainsaw keyboard actually viable to use, but you're missing something. You're missing that sheer delightful panic of being faced down by a group of enemies and frantically trying to find the right words to make them go away. Speaking of frantic, yes, I did load it up with nuts, and mercifully, it did not assign a word to every single enemy on screen. What I actually discovered through this is that Typist actually only assigns words to enemies of a certain radius away from the player. I guess you could regard this as a readability thing, but then again, when you're on the ground facing down all of these enemies, each with their own individual words, it does become a little tricky to separate the wheat from the chaff. But then again, when you've got a BFG as your chosen keyboard, every word's the right word. So yeah, Typist. An absolute nightmare for dyslexics. But fear not, there are alternative modes here. If you don't want to have to type out words, you can resort to arithmetic. This presents a range of simple equations for you to contend with in order to kill enemies, and I freely admit I am god-awful with numbers, even more so when I'm under any degree of pressure. So yeah, this is a living hell for me. At least some of the edge is taken off by the fact that this mod doesn't allow you to outright die. Sure, you'll take damage, but your health will never dip below 1. That's apparently an intentional choice by way of the author, because the aim of this is to help you out when it comes to being a little bit more proficient with typing, rather than just outright survival itself. That said, if you're a glutton for punishment, apparently the ability to die is in the works for future updates, but trust me, you're going to be doing a lot of it. In terms of things that I'd personally like to see in future updates to Typist, sentences, particularly in regards to bigger enemies. And the idea in my head is that if you've got to take down a bigger enemy, you should take a longer time typing out a kill phrase for it, and that may reflect the amount of damage you can deal. Actually, come to think of it, ignore me. It's a dumb as heck idea. All I can imagine now is having to come up against a cyber demon and typing out a full goddamn paragraph to kill it. I wouldn't mind seeing a little bit extra finesse in terms of how the weapons themselves work. You'll note that the plasma rifle in the previous clip only fired one single shot instead of a burst, which would probably be a little bit more satisfying. And when it comes to dealing with levels such as the focus, oh boy, that opening is a pain in the ass, because the line of sight just so happens to align with the bottom of the shutters, so trying to get those shotgunners behind this section here is just a bit of a headache. But there you go, Typist, a thoroughly admirable attempt to bring the delightful typing mechanics of Typing of the Dead into Doom. Sure, it's a bit clunky, but since when is having to type out words in order to kill your enemies not a clunky solution? In any case, if you're interested to give this one a whirl for yourself, you'll find the links, as usual, in the description below. And until next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.